Welcome to Industries Live. We have a action-packed agenda here today. We have both Stripe and Databricks that will be joining us today, and we're excited to have you here live as well. Join us every other Tuesday. We will be streaming with Industries Live, and today we're focused on financial services. I am Dr. Karen Hildebrand, and I lead our partner solutions architects for a number of different industries at AWS, including financial services, healthcare, life sciences, telco, media and entertainment, games, and sports. And I'm joined here today by my co-host, Addy. Addy.
Thanks, Karen. Hey, folks, I'm Addy Dubhashi. I'm part of our financial services partner team and focus on working with our partners to build those industry solutions that can support our customers. This would be our 9th episode, and we're really getting a chance to dive into how we're going to focus on specific solution areas and use cases, diving into financial fraud and financial crime in this one. We're going to kind of get very sharp and specific into real challenges that a large payments partner like Stripe faces. And then we're going to talk about broader areas of financial crime and fraud with our partner Databricks. And so today we're going to get into why and how customers face these challenges, how our partnership helps, and really keen to have Paul and the Stripe team on the call today.
And we'd love for this to be interactive. So please drop into the chat where you're joining us from today. We'd love to know where we have guests all around the world. So with that, let's join in and have Paul join us on camera. Great. Paul, why don't you do a quick introduction and then we'll hop over to Josh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Chang. I'm part of the AWS payments team within Global Financial Services. I'm glad to be here today to talk about fraud detection and prevention.
Awesome.
Josh?
Hey, folks. I'm Josh Ackerman. I lead the Radar team at Stripe. Radar is our fraud prevention product, and I've been at Stripe for the past 7 years, leading teams of product folks working on fraud prevention. So I'm excited to chat with all of you today.
Awesome. And we're starting to get a little bit of interaction. We've got Palo Alto and Zimbabwe already. So we're starting to get some action in here from our live stream. Go ahead, Addy.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So this is a really exciting space. We're talking about a market that has been at $200 billion in terms of financial fraud and complexity that banks have to deal with, growing and anticipated to be a $450 billion market for the challenges that customers face. Even within that, just the software ecosystem has just evolved and continues to rapidly change. And so we've seen kind of the start where complex manual processes move to process automation, which are now kind of leapfrogging ahead with machine learning. But it's a very unique space where you have to maintain that air gap. You have the defense and the attack, and so you have attackers constantly evolving. Certain patterns that are evolving on one part of the world that very rapidly get replicated in other parts of the world. And so, Josh, maybe we'll pass it to you. Stripe is such a fascinating story. Love to know about how Stripe kind of got started, how it's been in this space, and how you've seen that space emerge.
Definitely. Maybe it's even worth, before I jump into Stripe, maybe it's worth bringing us back and talking a little bit about how we got here from the lens of the financial ecosystem, which is when we look at how even credit cards came to be, they really originated in 1958 in Fresno, California, when Bank of America launched the Bank Americard, which later became Visa. But the interesting thing is that fraud and the type of online financial fraud that we're discussing isn't actually that new. Believe it or not, even in the 1970s, card skimming began with the introduction of magnetic strips on cards. And then the 1980s, we saw the rise of mail order telephone orders. And there was fraud associated with that too. And in the 1990s, once the internet really came to be, it just also created new opportunities for fraud. Like in the late 1990s, we saw the first phishing attacks on cardholders. In the early 2000s, data breaches became a major concern. And Stripe was founded in 2011. And at that time, there was a large push to find where are opportunities that businesses can move online, and how can we best serve our global customer bases. And so in the early 2010s, we really saw the majority of transactions start shifting from in-person to card not present or online purchases. And of course, fraud rose significantly as a result. Today, just as you've referenced, we've built and have launched complex machine learning technology that is tied directly to real-world impact and business outcomes as we analyze trillions of transactions in real time and identify fraudulent patterns.
I think that's really interesting. I know that we were talking about our pre-brief and how we were talking about the history of credit cards. It's been a decade since I managed a credit card segment for a large retailer here. And it was fascinating to talk about how fraud has changed and what those attack vectors look like now. Paul, you get to talk with a lot of our customers at AWS around what does payments look like? What are they looking for in fraud? Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what that broad conversation looks like that you get to have with customers?
Sure, absolutely, Karen. To Josh's point, right, cash is moving towards digital payments. And so as that increases, we're also seeing a trend from also moving to online, the e-commerce transactions, right? And e-commerce and online transactions typically are 3 times the fraud rates of physical point of sale. And so what we're seeing is really an increase in, fraud. According to Juniper Research, we're seeing a rise to 362 billion between the period of 2023 and 2028. So in order to prevent fraud, we're really working with customers to provide a multi-layer approach to fraud prevention. Similar to Stripe Radar, it's a multi-layer approach along the customer journey, and we look at it in 3 buckets the industry looks at it: identity verification, identity authentication, and fraud prevention. So starting with the onboarding, it's very important to authenticate the customer, run through the right KYC AML checks. So as part of digital onboarding, to make sure that we authenticate the customer and ensure the customer is who they say are and matches the government issued IDs that they use as part of onboarding. Pre-transaction, there's a lot of standards and innovations that are being done to secure, even before the transaction itself. That includes collecting information such as session intelligence, the IP address, the device information. It's also looking at, how does the customer interact with their phone or device using behavioral biometrics. And then during the transaction, being able to install things like risk-based authentication. So being able to analyze their patterns and only create friction if we believe that the person behind that device is a bad actor. And then also we're helping along the poster transaction as well. We're seeing higher levels of first-party fraud and making sure that there is information that helps with fraud related to returns and things along those lines. And so as we look at across the whole spectrum of the payment flow and the onboarding, we're really creating a multi-layer approach that includes biometrics, authentication, and dynamic data during the transaction itself to make sure this is a secure transaction.
That's such a fascinating space, and I having a chance. I grew up in India, and we were a very cash-oriented economy, and at the time, you kind of had a large populace taking off into digital payments as soon as the cell phone was available. This was a leapfrog for the economy. And so something that plays out globally is you have developed economies and developing economies dealing with fraud in a very different way. And so some of the platforms and systems we're talking about must meet for that resiliency, for that level of unique fraud that's occurring by geo, identifying scenarios where there is fraud occurring by intent, knowing the identification KYC processes of that respective regulation. It's just such a complex space, and seeing how our partners have really been able to innovate rapidly on AWS, shaping their platforms to be very flexible to these needs of our global customer base. It's absolutely fascinating. Stripe, I mean, the journey has been fantastic. Unicorn status all the way back in 2013, 2014. Absolutely disrupted the ecosystem and the way the payments workflows used to occur. And then Radar kind of coming out of that. Josh, talk to us about what that journey has been like for y'all at Stripe, and Radar as an interesting platform that's really been a global one built on AWS.
Definitely. So I guess for a little bit of context for folks who might not have the background, while Stripe started processing payments, we, of course, quickly saw that fraud was a top concern for our user base. And so we built and launched Stripe Radar shortly after launching Stripe Payments. And Stripe Radar is our fraud prevention solution that uses machine learning and AI to reduce payment fraud and approve more legitimate transactions globally, all with zero code to get started. It's worth saying that for us at Stripe, we don't just want to prevent as much fraud as we possibly can. but we're constantly trying to find the right balance between stopping fraudsters as their technology and as their tactics evolve, while simultaneously ensuring that our legitimate customers are never wrongfully declined. And so, to the point that Paul made, it's a really careful balancing act that we're constantly trying to strike, of ensuring that Radar is as powerful as possible at detecting those bad actors, while simultaneously ensuring every good, well-intentioned person can complete their online or in-person checkout experience. The way that we do this under the hood is we actually have a number of fraud prevention and fraud protection models that incorporate hundreds of signals, charge signals, device and behavioral signals, and customer and aggregate signals. And these signals then enable our machine learning models to craft risk scores. And these scores then enable us and the platforms and the marketplaces and merchants that are built on top of Stripe to determine if that's a transaction that they want to allow, or it's a transaction that they want to review or block. All of this is actually built on top of the AWS infrastructure. Stripe has long relied on AWS to provide the core compute infrastructure on top of which Radar is built. And even during our peak days like Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we pride ourselves on delivering industry-leading uptime, and we just have a relentless commitment to putting our users first and ensuring that we're reducing fraud while maintaining that really seamless consumer experience.
So I think that's super interesting, because you did really speak to the primary balance that you have to strike when you're thinking about fraud, and being able to say, what are the merchants comfortable with as a fraud percentage, in order to make sure that they don't decline a legitimate transaction or have a customer experience that they don't expect. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like from a latency expectation? What are customers looking for, and how is Radar able to achieve that from an implementation standpoint when you're using these many signals?
That's a great point, Dr. Hildebrand, because I think the piece that I'll emphasize is that our customer base has basically zero tolerance for fraud. They count on Stripe being able to operate in milliseconds, and knowing that every transaction will be properly authorized or blocked if it is a fraudulent transaction in the appropriate amount of time. And so for us, we prioritize latency. It's not an afterthought. In fact, speed is part of the core product. And it's one of the reasons why merchants and platforms come to Stripe, is because of the fact that we have to make these decisions in real time. And one of the things that aids us in doing this most effectively is that as a result of Stripe's network, when a new payment instrument comes to Stripe as part of a new transaction, there's actually a 93% chance that we've already seen that payment instrument before. And so our machine learning models aren't just trying to adapt based on similar information. We're actually using data about each and every payment instrument that we've seen before. We've got a tremendous history. And so we're able to systematically reduce fraud in the ecosystem, knowing that when a new merchant gets started, we've probably seen that customer and that payment instrument a number of times before.
And that is so important. One of the biggest challenges in the industry has always been about false positives. Over 90%, in some research has said 98% of flags that are coming up inside organizations are false flags, and there is a cost to this. The estimates call out that in order to assess a ticket and then resolve it, it costs between $25 to $50, and so this is a massive cost for organizations. Paul, you're probably seeing this play out. Fantastic platforms like Radar are at the cutting edge, but what are customers looking to solve in the current market? And would love to know about how we're kind of diving in to solve these. And I'm looking to kind of get those real world examples that Paul and Josh, y'all are seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of as Josh mentioned, right? For fraud, it's all about data, right? And then having a global presence like Stripe and having that rich transaction history really does help, for better fraud prevention. And then in terms of false positives, in the industry typically is about 20-1 or 15-1. So every 20 declined transactions is to really block one fraudulent transaction. So in the industry, we continue to strive to do better to bring that down to 5-1 or below by leveraging things like information that comes from the session intelligence, from your authentication metrics as well, and also being able to leverage data during the transaction flow itself. So if you think about how we're moving forward as industry, a good example is in Europe, right, with PSD3, so the Payment Service Directive. That's also requiring more real-time transaction fraud prevention, and it's encouraging the customers, like the banks and the payment companies as well, to really start to upgrade their systems into the cloud, to leverage services from ISVs like Stripe Radar to be able to detect fraud more real time and be able to message the customers in more real time to identify risk and so forth. And Stripe has been a great partner, being able to collaborate with AWS, also with the payment networks, to be able to get information about fraud sooner, to be able to embed that into their ML flow and ML ops flow as well.
Well, you certainly have a lot of engaged viewers here. We have people from Oman, Lisbon, Swaziland. Atlanta is apparently making me feel bad that I can still see snow outside my window. They've got 56 degrees. Tell us a little bit more. Keep dropping in the chat, those that are online, any questions you may have for our experts here with Paul and Josh. But Josh, maybe you can expand a little bit more on some of the use cases that you're seeing.
Definitely. Well, I guess it's worthwhile to touch on the fact that Radar works globally. We have a global audience, and Radar screens transactions globally and uses all of these data points to try to find, what are fraudulent transactions that we should block, while simultaneously ensuring that all good, well-intentioned users are able to complete their online checkout flows. Just to share some examples of existing companies that are using Radar, and I can talk a little bit about how. We've got everyone from Anthropic, OpenAI, to OpenTable, Figma, 7-Eleven, Zoom, Warby Parker, Robinhood, that are all screening transactions via Stripe Radar. We've even got some really new innovative startups like HeyGen, which they've quickly become the market leader in creating realistic avatars based out of Los Angeles. And in using our Radar fraud prevention products, they've actually seen a 69% decrease in their fraud rate, a 57% decrease in their dispute rate. And to the point that we were chatting about earlier around preventing around false positives. For those of you that might not be familiar, false positives are basically legitimate transactions that are incorrectly flagged as fraudulent. And so our goal is to try and make sure that we're increasing subscriber lifetime value and ensuring that no well-intentioned user ever gets blocked. And HeyGen actually saw a 15% increase in subscriber lifetime value and a 21% increase in authorization rates as a result of using our Radar product. We have many companies that are in similar positions, such as 8 Sleep. They actually saw a 45% decrease in chargeback rates. And Stripe Radar made a dramatic improvement in helping to reduce the number of transactions that were wrongfully flagged as fraudulent. We pride ourselves on doing this every day and in supporting CROs, CISOs, CFOs to ultimately create better consumer experiences and improve their bottom lines.
So you know that I'm going to go on to a super nerdy question here, but I promise everybody that's online, I'll keep it short. But can you tell us a little bit, Josh, about how do you integrate, and how can both, one, how do you retrain your models with tons of new data coming in, and then as a consumer of the Radar product, how do you integrate? Like, what is the actual design pattern for that, and how quickly can somebody say, hey, I saw this on Industries Live and I'm super excited about it and I want to try it?
Yes, totally. All right, so I'll start with the first question, and then I'll jump to the first question around integration, and then I'll jump to the second one around how we actually retrain our ML models over time. So on the first point of integration, actually, if you're already processing payments on Stripe, getting started with Radar is a no-code, super easy, one-click way to turn on in the Stripe dashboard. However, I imagine there are probably folks on this live stream who aren't using Stripe to process payments today. And so Radar now works in a multi-processor manner too. So regardless of where you are processing payments, you can actually screen those transactions via Radar to reduce your fraud. And we'll share a link in the chat for exactly where you can go to start checking out our documentation and getting started with Stripe Radar. And then to your second question. Oh.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to talk a little bit about model retraining, but Addy, did you want to jump in?
Absolutely.
On model retraining, I think one of the cool things is that we have a continuous data collection and feedback loop. We're processing over $1 trillion annually, and we have 500 million API requests every single day. And so we're basically taking all of these data points and establishing a continuous feedback loop. Basically what happens is our machine learning systems are constantly gathering transaction data about transactions globally. We're doing outcome tracking on every transaction. We're working with networks and issuers to determine which ones are legitimate, which ones are fraudulent, down the road, which ones are disputed. And we take that feedback and integrate it back into our machine learning systems. So our ML just continues to learn over time and to make more and more accurate predictions about which transactions are down the road likely to lead to fraudulent disputes. AI has been popular in this process, and ML has aided us for many years. Obviously, the more recent advances in AI are really exciting, especially from a consumer perspective. But for us, this automated and targeted retraining and data science-led approach through ML and AI has been a many years-long endeavor.
Yeah, and just to add to Josh's point, this is exactly what banks and customers are looking for. If you think about the new regulations like PSD3, it's really requiring customers to go from historically that static rule-based set for fraud prevention to leveraging things like AI-based transaction monitoring and fraud prevention to be able to detect it sooner and more in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the absolute differentiator, right? Stripe being able to allow customers to really focus on their core business while abstracting away the concerns of their payments systems, offering them Radar to just allow for that level of fraud detection and early flagging. So just allowing them to have that control and confidence. And AWS, we really focus on that as well, which is how can we make it really easy for our customers to see the value of what they can take from the technology landscape, but apply it to their business and then focus on their business. And so they don't have to take ownership of that heavy, undifferentiated lifting that isn't something that is not in line with our core business. So this is an excellent example. It's a quick kind of plug on how the AWS partner team really invests with our partners, right? We're really keen on calling out these stories in sessions like Industries Live, where we can call out the Better Together partnership we have with Stripe. All of this kind of translates into go-to-market efforts. So when we kind of publish this content, something that we do, at the back of it is making sure that teams between Josh's groups and Paul's groups are driving engagement at customers. So if you are kind of looking to understand this space, we're going to be sharing a few links, but we offer numerous courses, workshops, and game days, as we call them, as a chance for our customers and our developer communities to learn more. So watch out for those links that we'll be posting in there as well. It might be a good segue. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
There's a really cool question that just dropped into the chat here from Peter, which is, Josh, when you're thinking about the data points, like I could go back to 10 years ago, how I did this from a data science standpoint and how we created new features and all that kind of good stuff. But could you tell us now, what is the state of the art in terms of how do you evolve data points that you're considering? And then how do you measure the success rate of Radar so that when you're retraining, that you're ensuring that the new data points that you're including are actually improving the model success?
Yes. One of the beautiful things about working in fraud is that we can take a very, very data-driven approach. And this allows us to know with confidence if our models are successfully blocking bad actors or if we are unintentionally, accidentally blocking good consumers. And so we have a set of core performance metrics that we are looking at all the time. We're looking at our fraud prevention rates, our false positive rates, our chargeback reduction rates. And ultimately, what we're doing behind the scenes is actually creating an ROI calculation for all of our merchants and platforms to prove that the dollar value of prevented fraud losses are demonstrated versus the cost to use a tool like Stripe Radar. The other thing that I'll acknowledge is it's not just about how we decrease fraud and ensure that we are decreasing false positives. But the other thing is that when you look at fraud teams and risk teams, there are also teams of dozens to hundreds to thousands of manual reviewers. And it takes them time to detect fraud. And for us, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is ensuring that we can actually enable risk reviewers and fraud reviewers to make decisions in a more timely basis, and even hopefully take away some of the work that was overburdening them by enabling them to focus on some of the most complex cases so that they don't have to focus on the cases that are obviously, bad-intentioned actors or really good actors that are trying to complete a checkout flow. So I guess for us, we're constantly looking at industry average performance metrics. We're constantly doing competitive benchmarking to ensure that Radar is best in class and is the gold standard for fraud prevention when it comes to online transactions.
So Addy, I always have to do a small little call out here to competencies because you usually talk about competencies, but I will say that Stripe has also just earned the media and entertainment competency because of your work with monetization. And I think that was really cool that you tied that together with an actual customer story. You're working across every industry, and so you get to see a lot of transactions in terms of what does bad actors and good actors look like across different industries. So while we're talking about financial services here today, what you're able to provide for customers is across industry and across company size as well. We certainly see that you're very well integrated, obviously, in the micro enterprise market as well. But Addy, do you want to talk about competencies and the importance of figuring out how to select the right partner for the right job?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main reasons that we really invest with our partners is we want to help our partners create that specialization for the financial services industry. So when we call out the competency, we're recognizing these partners that have proven patterns and proven architectures, making it really easy for our customers to spin up these workloads seamlessly in their environment. But also each of these have been cross-validated by our teams with customer references, making it really easy for decision makers to make that decision. This also extends to kind of developer community. So if you are someone who's interested in financial services or looking to dive deeper, you can access all of the content that we develop for our partners on Partner Central. So one of the easiest ways for you to get started are to register as an AWS partner and then get in there and kind of take a journey towards that financial services competency as a technology firm or a consulting firm.
Very cool. I know
I realize we're almost at time.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Josh, would you close us out with the 30-second takeaway of what you want everybody that's here on the live stream to remember about this conversation with Stripe, and call out to everybody that just joined from India. It's super cool. There's like 6 in a row. So with that, Josh, 30-second recap for our audience.
Fraud prevention is a really complicated space. And to put it simply, it's constantly evolving too. You as an online business or marketplace have a responsibility to stay ahead of the curve and ahead of bad actors. And one of the key ways of doing that is using machine learning to reduce payment fraud and approve more transactions globally. For us, it's not just about, how do we block more transactions? How do we block more bad actors? But it's equally as important to figure out how do we ensure all good actors and well-intentioned consumers have a great experience when they're coming to your site, to your business, and they want to make a purchase online.
I think that is a great recap, because ultimately, as the customer, we always say we work backwards from customers. What you're working backwards from is your customer's customer, and being able to ensure that they feel like they're valued as a customer if they are a legitimate transaction. And I think that's a really positive way of looking at that, while also ensuring that all those bad actors have a the worst experience that they can possibly have. So I love that. So Paul, I do want to say 30 seconds to you. What do you want to make sure that everybody that's watching remembers about fraud and payments and working with AWS ecosystem?
Yeah, so as payments go digital, it's important to work with partners like Stripe to really secure your ecosystem, right? Like we mentioned, we really want a good customer experience, and it's all about increasing the approval rate while keeping the fraud rates and false positive ratio at bay. So letting the good actors make their transactions and creating a lot of friction for the bad actors.
I love it. I feel like I could talk about AI ML forever here, Addy. What's your recap so I don't go over time?
No, this is fantastic. I'm really keen to dive into the journeys that are taking place with Stripe and the AWS teams on the ground. But it's also about fraud and financial crime that occurs outside the banking and payment space. So I'm looking forward to that next session as we dive in with Antoine and the Databricks team. But folks, Josh, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. It was excellent to have you on.
Thank you for having us.
It was a pleasure.